Listen up, sports fans, because the truth is finally spilling out, and Kendrick Perkins just completely exposed Stephen A. Smith for running a covert operation to get him fired from the network. But hold on to your seats, because there is more. Big Perk is exposing a toxic pattern of behavior that will permanently shatter your image of sports media's absolute biggest star. Let us unpack this madness, and hey, do not forget to subscribe. It all boils down to one single, monumental phone call that Perkins claims will be burned into his brain forever. Not because it was cause for celebration, and certainly not because it secured him a bag, but because it completely unmasked the real Stephen A. Smith. Once the studio lights shut off and the audience tunes out, here is the wild part most folks miss. The exact same guy who shared a desk with Big Perk on First Take every single morning, grinning directly at him, cracking up at all his punchlines, and playing the role of the ultimate supportive buddy. That very same dude was secretly plotting in the shadows to get the former NBA champ completely banned from the airwaves. And the craziest detail, he was inches away from succeeding. Had it not been for a total fluke of a chat that the big man stumbled into with a top-tier corporate boss, a meeting that literally was never intended to take place, this massive betrayal would have stayed buried. But hold up. Before we drop that nuke, make sure you smash that like button, because you have to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. See, this intense clash between Perk and Stephen A. is way bigger than a simple locker room beef between two talking heads with clashing opinions. This right here is a masterclass in absolute power. It is about unchecked control, and above all else, it is a glaring warning of what goes down when the absolute king of the sports television industry decides to snatch your hard-earned spot right out from under you. So, let us roll the tape back, because the bad blood did not kick off in 2026. It was brewing way before that, right when the towering retired center was just trying to navigate his next chapter off the hardwood. Rewind to 2019, when the network brought him on board to break down the game. Initially, everything was golden. Seriously, it was a flawless launch. The man was starving for success. He was completely dialed in, grinding it out daily, and proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that he owned that broadcasting desk just as fiercely as any other retired athletic superstar who traded their sneakers for a tailored suit and a microphone. However, a massive roadblock stood in his way, and that obstacle had a very specific identity. See, during his rookie season on the air, he definitely was not securing the massive bags of cash you would assume a primetime daily television icon brings home. Management had him locked into what the business labels a daily gig agreement. In plain English, he was taking home roughly $2,500 a shift, chained to a brutal restriction on exactly how many times he was allowed to clock in every 30 days. Because of this, while countless fans tuning in from their living rooms watched him dominate the morning debate stage, assuming he was an undeniable, tenured pillar of their favorite program, the Backstage truth was incredibly grim. The corporate brass basically treated him like a glorified temp worker, summoning him on a whim, tossing him out when they felt like it, and handing him a check that barely covered his travel expenses. Now, grab your popcorn, because this is where the plot thickens. And this is exactly where Stephen A. crashes into the narrative in a manner that has completely flown under the radar until now. The timeline was roughly 2020, possibly early 2021, right when the postseason was catching fire, and our guy Stephen A., who had already cemented himself as the undisputed king of the channel, easily cashing the fattest checks in the entire building, a titan whose hot takes literally shaped the industry and birthed legends. Well, the top dog decided he needed Big Perk across from him for the entire Monday through Friday lineup. We are not talking a quick cameo or a 2-day stint. We mean every single morning. And guess what went down? When the face of the brand pitched that brilliant idea to the upper management, they flat out rejected him. Seriously, they looked the megastar who was gearing up to ink a $100 million extension right in the eyes and denied him. They claimed the towering big man was legally barred from pulling a full 5-day run due to the strict red tape of his paperwork. His freelance gig had a ceiling, and the stubborn corporate suits refused to shatter protocol, refusing to cater even to their ultimate cash cow. But if you follow Stephen A., you know he never accepts defeat. And here comes the chapter of the saga that the former big man personally spilled while speaking on the Straight Game podcast. This is the exact reason fans spent years entirely convinced that the veteran host was fiercely protecting his colleague, because the megastar immediately grabbed his cell, dialed up the head honchos, and straight up ordered them to tear up the rules and make it happen. According to the big man himself, the sports media king dropped a line that evening that completely flipped his professional life upside down. He simply stated, "The suits are going to ring you in the morning." Right on cue, less than 24 hours later, the network executives hit his line with a proposal that left his jaw on the floor. They bypassed a simple extension of his freelance gig. They totally skipped over just tossing him a couple extra shifts. Instead, they completely shredded his garbage agreement, tossing out the contract that still had 12 months remaining, and slid a phenomenal 3-year masterclass deal across the table, locking him in at roughly $700,000 every 12 months. Just like magic, the retired giant skyrocketed from scraping by on $20,500 a shift, with zero safety net, to cementing his legacy as a premier, fully salaried network anchor, comfortably banking roughly $750,000 every single trip around the sun. And the mastermind behind that massive payday, none other than Stephen A. himself. Hey, before we continue, make sure you hit that subscribe button to join our squad. Now, if you are getting this tea for the first time, you are likely thinking exactly what the rest of the world assumed when the news initially dropped. You are probably sitting there saying, wait a minute, that sounds exactly like, picture this. Stephen A. Smith throws Kendrick Perkins an absolute lifeline. On the surface, it looks like pure brotherhood, a buddy having his guys back. It comes across as the undisputed king of ESPN pulling strings for the right reasons. For a minute there, Big Perk genuinely bought into that exact narrative, along with the rest of us. But before we expose the shocking truth Perk learned way down the line, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Now, here is the wild part. Stephen A.'s true intentions were far from noble. Based on bombshells dropped by the former center himself, that massive financial bump had absolutely nothing to do with loyalty. It was a calculated game of chess, and Perk was merely a piece on the board. Let this sink in for a second. Back in 2020, Smith was already hammering out the details of his blockbuster mega deal with the worldwide leader in sports. He was setting the stage to be more than just the star of First Take. He was morphing into the unofficial showrunner and ultimate boss. The man demanded absolute authority over his debate partners. He needed to handpick whoever dared to cross swords with him live on television, and crucially, he wanted to dictate the exact parameters of those arguments. Enter Big Perk, a massive, fiery, rough around the edges retired champion who guaranteed viral moments. Yet someone Smith felt entirely confident he could verbally destroy every single time. It was a match made in heaven. Stephen A. did not secure that bag for Perk out of the kindness of his heart or concern for the man's family. He certainly did not push for it because he viewed him as the sharpest. Basketball mind on the payroll. The real motive? Tying Perk down to a multi-year agreement gave him a permanent punching bag that he could easily manipulate. He wanted a guy whose whole broadcasting existence relied heavily on his personal endorsement. He needed a loyal soldier who, when the going got tough, would forever be indebted to the Kingmaker. And for several seasons, the script played out flawlessly. Perk clocked in, yelled his takes, stirred the pot, and executed his assignment perfectly. Meanwhile, Smith basked in the spotlight, orchestrating the entire circus like a maestro, running his own personal symphony. But then, a plot twist hit the studio that completely blindsided the veteran host. The former big man suddenly ripped up the script once he began firing back at his boss with takes that crossed the line from manufactured drama into genuine, uncomfortable territory. Things shifted fast. Suddenly, Smith was no longer dialing up upper management to secure a raise for his guy. He was allegedly making calls to have him thrown out. The foundation of their alliance was crumbling. To truly grasp why the face of the network finally snapped and turned against his former protege, we need to dive into the chaotic on-air history they shared. By the way, if you love this kind of deep dive sports drama, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Their fallout was not an overnight explosion. It was a grueling, slow-motion train wreck. What started as lighthearted banter gradually devolved into vicious, below-the-belt insults. Every single clash eroded whatever tiny shred of mutual respect remained in the tank. The spark that lit the powder keg ignited over one of the most volatile topics in sports media, race. Flashback to February of 2023, live on the First Take desk. We had our usual suspects, plus JJ Redick, the lethal three-point marksman turned absolute top-tier basketball intellectual. The trio was fiercely debating the most valuable player candidates. Out of nowhere, the big man unleashed an opinion so radioactive, it threatened to burn the studio to the ground. His core premise, he claimed a systemic racial prejudice dictated the award outcomes. Leaning on his own statistics, he highlighted that only 3 guys outside the top 10 standings since 1980 had snatched the trophy, specifically naming Nikola Jokic twice and Dirk Nowitzki once. For him, this trend was absolutely no fluke. It was a wildly provocative stance guaranteed to ruffle feathers. Regardless of where you stood on the issue, it was pure television gold, the exact flavor of chaos that leaves network executives both sweating bullets and rubbing their hands together, fully aware that the social media algorithms were about to feast. And the timeline caught fire, but not from the angle anyone anticipated. The counterpunch came from the seat right beside him. JJ absolutely refused to entertain the notion. Zero tolerance. The ensuing verbal brawl instantly cemented itself as a legendary Hall of Fame sequence in morning television history. Redick snapped back, calling out the entire program, stating, "What we are watching right now is the exact disease infecting this platform, inventing toxic storylines out of thin air." But the former Duke star was only warming up. This transcended a simple squabble over data points. Redick was genuinely outraged, convinced his co-host had just thrown a disgusting accusation at an entire demographic, questioning the integrity of the journalists and the broader Hoops universe. He fired back, challenging the narrative head-on, demanding to know if the underlying accusation was that Caucasian media members were harboring bias and specifically propping up their own guys. You could practically feel the awkwardness radiating through the screen. The shooter's voice trembled, driven not by panic, but by pure, unadulterated anger. Say what you will about Big Perk, he held the line. He anchored his feet and fired right back amidst the chaos, shouting over the crosstalk as JJ repeatedly hammered him, insisting over and over again that the big man had heavily insinuated racism. The wildest detail, the marksman was so blindingly mad that he accidentally referred to him as Spencer instead of his actual first name. When someone forgets your name on live TV, that is your giant red flag that things have officially crossed from a friendly sports debate into a hostile, personal war zone. Backed into a corner, the former champ relied on his hardcore instincts and threw verbal haymakers of his own, fiercely defending himself by claiming he never threw labels, only laid out the raw numbers. What is up, sports fans? Let's dive into the absolute madness that unfolded on live television. He laid out the cold, hard facts and refused to back down. Let's be real, we all know the fallout from that broadcast was absolute dynamite. Twitter was in shambles, message boards were melting down, and right at the epicenter of the chaos, guess what Stephen A. Smith was up to? Insiders claim he was just chilling there, not uttering a single peep. He let Kendrick Perkins and JJ Redick absolutely go at each other's throats, treating the whole thing like a ringside VIP at a heavyweight clash. Eventually, the veteran host did break his silence. Dropping by the Bill Simmons show, he confessed the whole ordeal derailed fast. He mentioned the vibe got super awkward, officially stating, number 1, these things can cross the line. Number 2, on that specific episode, they definitely crossed it. In my eyes, both guys were out of bounds to some extent. It was definitely a tense watch. But listen up, folks, before we dive into what truly ground Big Perk's gears, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because the real issue wasn't the on-air fireworks. Perk has practically lived in the pressure cooker his whole life, spending more than 10 years battling in the association, lifting a championship trophy with the Celtics, and surviving absolute trenches during the postseason. Against the most terrifying dudes on earth means a screaming match on daytime TV wasn't going to make him flinch. No, what truly stung Kendrick was the post-show reality. Word on the street from Perk is that the face of the network never pulled him into a room to say, "Man, that went off the rails, but I am in your corner." There was no late night phone call to see how he was holding up. Instead, Stephen A. allegedly moved in the shadows, weaponizing that massive Redick. Meltdown to pitch Perkins as a total wildcard, a broadcast risk who couldn't be handed a live microphone, without sparking an absolute nightmare for the corporate public relations team. And if you think that was a one-off, think again. The lead anchor reportedly held these viral clashes against Big Perk in executive meetings time and time again. The friction never stopped, and the playbook remained identical. The duo would trade heavy blows on set, arguing over the greatest of all time debate, battling over the most valuable player race, or going back and forth about which conference was truly king of the hardwood. But the moment the director yelled, "Cut," the senior analyst would supposedly run up the corporate ladder and frame Kendrick as the villain. Look no further than the massive scheduling beef back in August of 2025. The league had just dropped its highly anticipated holiday slate, and it was heavily tilted toward in the West Coast. 4 of the 5 marquee matchups showcased Western squads, leaving just the Cavs and the Knickerbockers to hold it down for the East. The legendary loudmouth blasted the decision as a slap in the face to the Eastern Conference, but Kendrick hopped straight onto the Road Trippin' podcast and absolutely shredded that logic piece by piece. His stance was crystal clear, unapologetic, and totally spot on. He pointed out that the West simply hoarded all the box office draws. We are talking Anthony Edwards, Nikola Jokic, Shai, Gilgeous-Alexander, King James, Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, and even Cooper Flagg. Perk argued the commissioner was making brilliant money moves by showcasing prime talent under the brightest lights, especially knowing the association had to go toe-to-toe with the football juggernaut for holiday ratings. The big man pulled 0 punches, claiming the association is still run by the legends K, D, Steph, and Bron. Who tips off the fresh season? That exact trio, alongside the reigning title holders getting their jewelry. Who gets the primetime holiday spots? Again, K, D, Steph, and Bron. He took to the analysis a step further, dissecting the ratings war so sharply that it left the veteran host take looking incredibly weak. He noted that fans have a doubleheader of sports choices on December 25th. You have got the gridiron, the undisputed champion of television. Everyone knows that. But to secure those precious television ratings on the hardwood, you have to ask yourself, where do your ultimate moneymakers hoop? The answer is out west. Now, if you are enjoying this inside scoop, do not forget to smash that subscribe button. To the casual viewer, this looked like a standard debate over a calendar. Standard operational procedure. The exact daily grind of talking heads in the sports broadcasting world. However, scratching below that veneer, Perk insists this was yet another instance of his co-host loading up the ammunition. Why? Because rumor has it, the star anchor absolutely despised getting schooled on the microphone. Doubly so by a guy who owed his very seat at the worldwide leader to a string pulled by that same anchor years prior, which perfectly sets the stage for what is arguably the biggest red flag of the entire saga. The moment the face of morning television went on a classic, unhinged monologue. He wasn't breaking down defensive schemes, dissecting a franchise, or roasting an athlete. He targeted Big Perk directly. That footage spread like wildfire. Looking visibly furious at the desk, the host unleashed a tirade on his colleague that crossed the line from professional critique into direct, personal attacks. He literally said, "When it comes to the actual hoops takes, I am not really at odds with the big fella, but he is working my last nerve this morning." Let me explain exactly why he is getting under my skin. Pause right there and catch that phrasing. He did not push back on the actual sports knowledge. He never claimed the former center had his facts twisted. He straight up confessed. He just found the man irritating. The game had completely left the building. We were strictly in vendetta territory now. As the rant rolled on, the volume... Are you ready for the absolute wildest sports media drama? Hit that subscribe button right now because this tea is scorching. The tension was skyrocketing with every single word dropped, mainly because we are dealing with a certified title winner here. We are diving into a high-stakes game. 7 scenario, and he is out here lecturing about Game 7 pressure. You would think someone is just going to rise to the occasion, right? But instead, Stephen A decided to go straight for the throat. He dragged up the exact sore subject from Perk's playing days that literally every basketball fanatic remembers. I am talking about the physical setback that sidelined him during his ultimate career-defining matchup. And he drops this purely to undermine a ring winner. He shouted that not only did Boston drop that critical 7th game, but Perk was laid up hurt and completely sidelined. For Kendrick, that exact verbal jab completely obliterated the boundary of respect, dredging up his 2010 championship series trauma. Specifically, the busted knee that benched him against Los Angeles in the final showdown was just brutal. Boston fell short that night, and that ghost still tortures the big man today. That was 0% sports commentary and 100% a lethal backstab. And the face of First Take made sure to dig the blade in deep on live TV. The implication was that a healthy Perk would have conquered the purple and gold, which is massive. The underlying jab was unmistakable. Stephen A essentially stripped Perk of his credentials to discuss clutch moments, basically saying, "You cannot speak on Game 7 heat since you were riding the pine during the most crucial match of your life." Even though the host, Malika Andrews, scrambled to intervene and play peacemaker, offering to defend his character while noting the clock was ticking, pointing out that screaming a hot take does not magically make it factual. The wreckage was already smoking. Social media snagged the viral bite. The storyline was cemented in stone. Before we uncover the shady backstage moves, make sure to drop a like on this video. Word on the street straight from Perk is that Stephen A weaponized these exact blowups to construct a dossier for network bosses, painting the big guy as a massive liability. However, the beef involving Sir Charles back in March 2025 perfectly illustrates the blatant hypocrisy brewing in Bristol. Once, Chuck blasted Kendrick on TNT's flagship show, labeling him a clown over his takes on Los Angeles. The former sinner unleashed hell across social platforms with his trademark fire, demanding Chuck bring that same energy in person. At that specific moment, Stephen A seemingly threw on the cape for his colleague, tweeting out a warning for Chuck to quit the vague insults and directly address the man. Looks like a stand-up move from a true broadcast partner, right? Well, Kendrick insists that once the camera stopped rolling, the script flipped entirely. While playing the fiercely loyal co-host for the timeline, Kendrick alleges that the veteran analyst was secretly whispering to top executives, framing the Barkley clash as concrete proof that the big man was a walking public relations disaster for the channel. The pitch, per Kendrick's account, was straightforward. This dude incites chaos nonstop, whether he is on The Daily Panel, doing audio shows, tweeting, or sparring with rival channel stars. It is only a matter of time before the migraine outweighs the ratings. The most savage twist here, by the time June 2025 rolled around and the two legends finally buried the hatchet, driven by Michael Wilbon stepping in to clear the air, which even led to Chuck inviting him out for a meal. During the championship rounds, the structural collapse at the network was already underway. The toxic narrative Stephen A had carefully fed to, management had blossomed, and Kendrick was on the verge of discovering the brutal reality of workplace politics. Because there happened to be one final controversy, an additional highly publicized mess that reportedly handed his co-star the exact leverage required for the knockout punch. Surprisingly, it was entirely unrelated to hoops. The culprit was a mobile entertainment platform known as Papaya Gaming. Back in November 2025, the sports giant allegedly issued a hard mandate forcing personalities, Kendrick included, to sever all connections with the heavily scrutinized application. Management slapped a conflict of interest label on it and required immediate obedience. But get this, here is the kicker that absolutely infuriated the former center. His top-billed colleague had heavily pushed that exact same software. Yet, the rumor mill claims the A-lister dodged every single penalty. 0 public reprimands, 0 mandated breakups, just pure silence. The subtext, according to the big guy, was blindingly obvious. Bristol operated under a golden rulebook for their main attraction, while tossing the disciplinary manual at the rest of the roster. And when you are Kendrick, a guy who basically launched his broadcasting journey off a cosign from the network's biggest star, straying from the designated path meant putting your whole livelihood on the line. Then came the fallout. Fast forward to February 2026. The red flags were flying everywhere, and the former champ saw the writing in bold font. Gossip had been flooding the timeline for roughly a month. Clickbait content creators were dropping dramatic uploads constantly, falsely declaring that the network had permanently axed the analyst. Following another massive on-air explosion with his rival, troll accounts were working overtime to manufacture bogus press releases, perfectly copying the exact format of heavy hitters like Shams and Woj just to make the chaos look official. Meanwhile, deep in message boards and scattered across every digital sports community nationwide, viewers were fiercely arguing about if the big man had finally worn out his welcome in Bristol. The chatter became overwhelmingly loud, leaving the analyst feeling like, for the very first instance in his professional life, he could no longer steer his own public image. If you are loving this breakdown, make sure you are subscribed, but fans constantly overlook one crucial detail about this particular competitor. This dude was forged in the fires of Beaumont, Texas, an area he proudly dubs the 409, a place where survival instincts teach you from day one that backing down is never an option. When the pressure is on, true warriors don't retreat, they charge head first. Before we dive into this insane sports drama, smash that like button and subscribe. Now, that fearless mindset is precisely what Big Perk brought to the table. Broadcasting live, he stared straight down the barrel of the lens. Possessing that ice-cold swagger exclusive to veterans who simply do not care about the consequences anymore, the former center dropped a massive bomb that completely rocked the entire sports broadcasting ecosystem. He declared that if the higher-ups handed him his walking papers today, he wouldn't shed a single tear. His reasoning? Because Beantown would snatch him up instantly. Unsurprisingly, that clip caught fire on the timeline in seconds. But the raw impact wasn't just about the flex itself, it was the deeper meaning behind the rant. The big man wasn't merely bragging about having a safety net. He wasn't just shouting out his championship city, a place that practically worships him as a hometown hero. Make no mistake, he was launching a tactical strike. And that lethal shot was aimed squarely at one specific target, Stephen A. Smith. What he would say, truly broadcasting, in a dialect only those fluent in corporate espionage can fully grasp, was, "I am not your property. You honestly believe you paved my way? You think tossing me a bone back in 2020 grants you the absolute authority to terminate my television run? Guess again, buddy, because I had a massive legacy long before our paths crossed, and I'll still be a star long after you're out of the picture. If this company hands me a pink slip just because you play politics in the shadows, I'm strutting out of here completely unbothered with recruiters blowing up my phone." The digital world absolutely lost its mind over this clash. Trolls had a field day. Loyalists gave him his flowers. A vocal minority even insisted he was just another clueless talking head who should have been benched ages ago. But no one, not the haters, not the skeptics, and certainly not the top dog himself, could ignore the massive elephant in the room. The former champion actually had the guts to do what everyone else in Bristol is terrified of. He aired out the dirty laundry. And trust me, the tea he spilled in the ensuing weeks was absolutely radioactive, because this wasn't a hit and run comment where he just faded into the background. He kept the heat coming on the podcast circuit, blasted on social platforms, did exclusive sit-downs, and systematically exposed the puppet strings. He detailed what he called a toxic cycle of gaslighting, blatant favoritism, and shady boardroom tactics that he claimed fueled the network's biggest star's grip on the company. The big man alleged that the face of the network heavily dictated not only the guest list for the morning debate show, but also strictly policed their approved talking points. Furthermore, he claimed his so-called brother would smile in his peers' faces while actively throwing them under the bus to upper management. Then there was the infamous Papaya Gaming hypocrisy, where supporting cast members were aggressively forced to cut ties with the brand, yet the main guy skated by without a single slap on the wrist for the exact same offense. He even ranted about how that original 2020 deal transformed from a career blessing into a suffocating, unbreakable collar. As for the executives, they gave us absolute crickets. No press releases were published. They refused to validate or deny the wild accusations. They essentially buried their heads in the sand, praying the chaotic internet cycle would magically sweep the fiasco under the rug. Hey, if you love deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Anyway, the suits couldn't erase the massive digital footprint left behind, because the blueprint of their toxic, Brotherhood was plastered everywhere, buried in years of television clashes, tweets, and audio clips. Once you match up their broadcasted arguments against the timeline of the alleged backstage sabotage, things get incredibly shady and deeply uncomfortable. Let's rewind. In 2020, the veteran host assists in landing a sweet $700,000 annual salary for Big Perk. Fast forward to 2023, and he allegedly sat back while a heated racial argument broke out between the center and J.J. Redick, then weaponized the fallout for corporate leverage. Then 2025 arrives. While openly backing his guy during the Charles Barkley beef, he was supposedly burying him as a walking PR disaster to the big bosses behind closed doors. By February 2026, the trap was fully set. It's a classic ruthless playbook. Build a colleague up so they completely owe you their livelihood. Then, the second they gain autonomy, when they form independent thoughts and dare to cross a line you didn't approve of, you utterly destroy them. Of course, you keep your hands squeaky clean in the spotlight because that ruins the golden boy image. The real assassinations happen in closed-door sessions. You operate through rumors, planting subtle seeds of doubt among the top brass who control the big budgets. And the most heartbreaking piece of this vicious sabotage campaign, it almost claimed its victim. Heading into the middle of February 2026, the grapevine was absolutely buzzing. Viewers were completely sure the big man was history. Every sports blog published articles about his impending termination, while his rival, according to the allegations, enjoyed the chaos from his throne, turning a colleague's financial ruin into primetime comedy material rather than respecting the gravity of a man's entire livelihood. However, the legendary talking head made one massive miscalculation. He totally overlooked the fact that the network's official press roster refused to scrub the veteran from their active basketball coverage list. He definitely didn't foresee him securing a massive spot on the revamped Hoops platform. Imagine sitting at the countdown desk right beside Malika Andrews, Brian Windhorst, and Michael Malone. But here is the massive miscalculation. He totally missed that the very same network bosses he was secretly lobbying had already made up their minds. Big Perk was staying put. And get this, it was absolutely not done as a favor to Stephen A. Smith, but as a direct rebellion against him. Now, brace yourselves for the absolute wildest plot twist of this entire saga, because while the undisputed face of the network was allegedly pulling strings in the shadows to get Perk booted, Smith actually went ahead and benched himself from the broadcast right in the middle of his own mega contract talks. He even went on the record claiming the gig just didn't fit into his packed schedule anymore. So pause for a second and let that sink in. While he was supposedly plotting to throw Perkins entirely off the airwaves, Smith became the guy who actually walked away. Meanwhile, Big Perk planted his feet and kept his seat. Honestly, you could not script a more perfect dose of karma. Quick pause, if you love this insider drama, make sure to smash that subscribe button, because the absolute boldest move Kendrick Perkins pulled during this entire media circus was not some trending soundbite. It wasn't spilling the tea on a podcast, dropping cryptic tweets, or throwing tantrums on live television. The ultimate power play was simply refusing to play the victim role that Stephen A. had mapped out for him. He refused to be just another tragic footnote. Listen, the sports broadcasting universe is essentially an absolute graveyard filled with pundits and talking heads who were completely devoured and discarded by the corporate monster. We are talking about folks who poked the wrong bear, stepped over the invisible boundary, or had the sheer audacity to disagree with the absolute heavyweight champion of the network. Usually, those rebels just vanish into thin air. They evaporate, instantly swapped out for the next loudmouth debater or retired pro who is perfectly happy to just sit there and enthusiastically nod along with every single word dropping from Stephen A.'s mouth. But Big Perk said absolutely not. He dug his heels in, held his territory, and blasted his own truth to the masses. In doing so, he dragged out the exact ugly reality that the giant sports network had been dodging for over a decade. It sparked a massive dialogue, exposing massive leverage, blatant double standards, and the dangerous fallout of letting a single media star become unbelievably untouchable. We are talking about a guy holding enough juice to completely ruin a career with just one quick dial. That identical line that secured Perk his massive $700,000 deal could have easily snatched it all right back. And honestly, that specific threat is what the former champ admitted truly terrified him beyond belief. It was never about the paycheck or the television fame. It was the chilling awakening that his whole livelihood at the media empire rested solely in the palm of a guy who honestly couldn't care less about his success. Real quick, if you're loving this breakdown, hit that like button, because as things stand today, Kendrick is still clocking in as a top-tier analyst. You can still pull up his official headshot in the network's active directory. All those wild rumors claiming he was let go? Completely busted. Even with that massive swarm of fake news accounts and viral trolls trying to convince the internet he was already packed up. As for Stephen A., he is undoubtedly sitting pretty on the throne, cashing the absolute biggest checks in the entire building, still flexing enough muscle to dictate sports debates globally. Yet, a massive earthquake just happened beneath the surface. A truly core dynamic just broke, because the secret is officially out. The viewers see it, the hardcore fans see it, and every single person grabbing their morning coffee to catch. First, Take realizes the screaming match on their screen is a completely different ballgame than the brutal politics happening backstage. Armed with that undeniable truth, that total clarity is the one problem. Stephen A. cannot simply talk in circles around, argue down, or aggressively shout into submission. The reality is that Kendrick completely outlasted the vicious backdoor sabotage orchestrated against him. He ripped the curtain wide open. By putting it all on blast, he revealed the exact dirty little secret the broadcasting giants have spent years desperately sweeping under the rug. The undeniable fact that the most brutal brawls in sports entertainment do not happen on hardwood floors or inside boxing rings. They go down in high-rise meeting rooms, behind closed doors, and during hushed calls where wealthy guys dictate the fates of their peers while eating their expensive salads. So, the very next time you catch these two heavyweights glaring at each other across the desk, shouting about King James, the ultimate valuable player race, or the holiday schedule, you need to stop and ask yourself one huge thing. Are you watching genuine passion or just the latest scripted act in a completely fixed circus that was completely prearranged before the red recording light ever blinked on? Because Big Perk has completely figured out that puzzle, and boom, now so do you. If this behind-the-scenes drama blew your mind, be sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss an update. We seriously appreciate you hanging out with us. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and we will catch you in the next breakdown.